a huge welcome to this webinar by the Cystic Fibrosis Trust on going to university, life at university with CF. From a parent perspective, we've got Jenny on today, and I'll introduce everyone in a little bit. We've got Emily, and we've also got Caitlin. And I'm Lucy. I'm the host of the See for Yourself podcast that the CF Trust do. And I've also got cystic fibrosis as well, so we'll be sharing some of my tips as well when I was at university, which is 9 years ago now, which makes me feel quite old. So I'll introduce each panelist to start, and then I'll kind of ask some questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and then at the end of the session we'll get to the questions and we can ask them. Or if you have questions after the session, do email the Work Forwards team, and they'll be able to help as well. So on the panel tonight, we've got Emily. Emily is 22. She got her dream job in digital publishing for a children's publisher. She went to uni, worked alongside studying at Exeter University, and she also got involved in a lot of societies, mainly to do with sustainability. So we'll chat to her a little bit more about that in a minute. Next, we've got Caitlin. Caitlin's 23 years old. She commuted, so didn't move out when she moved to York St John's University. Has done an undergrad and a master's at York St John, and her first year was in COVID, so at 2020, so kind of a very different first year compared to maybe Emily and myself. And then finally, we've got Jenny, and Jenny's son is 21 years old and is, am I right, in their final year at university, living away from home. So Jenny's going to be able to talk about kind of this perspective of the parent and kind of, you know, what's going through the parents' head as the children are off to uni, but also, I guess, some tips as well of letting go and trying to not have too many nerves as your child goes off to uni. So I guess if we start with you, Jenny, do you want to just explain a little bit about your son's experience at university and how, I guess, what was going through your head as he moved out?
Okay, so this was like 4 years ago now, because it's been a 4-year degree. So the timing of going to uni from the hospital that we're at also times with when you decide to transition between paediatric and adult care. And we did think ahead, and we had some advice to try and transition maybe in that lower 6th year. And at the same time, what we tried to do was stand back from, you know, physio, meds, made sure it was all there, just let him try and do it himself, so that the idea was all the disasters would happen when we were at home and we could help. And I think that worked really well transitioning to adult care in lower 6, because by the time he went to university, he was used to dealing with the team and he knew the team. And when he went to uni, he managed to keep with the same hospital. Didn't do shared care, and sort of 50% of the appointments are online and the other 50% are in person. In fact, probably more are online. But by the time he went, he was confident doing those appointments by himself. So that would be my first tip, is to hand over responsibility, and as early as you can, let them fail a little bit at home and try and move into adult care a good 12 months before they go.
And I think, and we'll probably chat to Emily and Caitlin a little bit about transition, because at university, you know, at 17, 18, there's a lot of changes happening in any teenager's life. Add on moving from paediatric to adult care when you've got CF as well, moving out of home for the first time, managing your money. There's so many things that are going through your head, and I don't think when you're 17, 18, you realise how much of a change it is. And so that tip that you said about kind of easing them into that whilst they're still at home is a really good tip, actually. Emily, Emily, do you want to give me kind of a bit of context about yourself, and your CF, and also what uni was like for you?
Yeah, okay. So I went to university in 2021. So I experienced COVID through my A levels. I was also really, really unwell from the age of about 14 to 18, in hospital all the time, sort of studying in for my GCSEs and my A levels in the hospital or having home IVs with my port. Um, so, CF kind of dictated my life at that point. And then when COVID hit, obviously, then Kaftrio sort of came along and I went on it. And it, I'm really lucky that it pretty much saved my life. My lung function went from in the sort of 40s, 50s to the 90s, and it's not there anymore. But at the time I needed it to, it really just got better. And I love to learn hugely. Like it meant so much to me, and it's kind of one of the only things when you're that sick that I could control and I could do myself. And my brain was so active, even if my body wasn't. So going to uni had been the ultimate dream for me. My parents had always nurtured the dream, but obviously cautious about it, knowing that potentially that's just not going to happen for me. So when Kaftrio ended up, making the transformation that it did, university suddenly became a very realistic solution to this entire new life of mine. So ended up going to Exeter, and coming out of COVID, where I'm an only child as well. Both my parents worked from home. I hadn't left the house. I didn't even go into my garden for 4 months because I was so sad and so stuck being at home. I went to university and I just threw myself into it, and really, I'm quite extroverted anyway, so I just adored it. And the whole experience, I was really fortunate. I never had any worry about it because I transitioned. I was slightly different. I transitioned at 16, because I think I was one of like the trial people at the Brompton of transitioning slightly early. So I'd already kind of experienced that, and my parents had done exactly the same as what you'd done, Jenny, and
Yeah.
kind of given me the responsibility. And in the hospital appointments, they wouldn't talk, they'd just spectate, and I'd lead it. And I mean, I'm sure you can hear it from me now. I think a lot of us with CF are very good at communicating how our body's feeling. So it is quite a natural thing to do. So going to uni, that I found that really easy. I found talking to people quite easy. I found throwing myself into slightly uncomfortable situations quite simple. And obviously, when you're feeling rough, that's not so easy, but I'm sure we'll come on to that. But the actual initial stage of me going to university was the most exciting, amazing, exhilarating point of my life that far. So.
Yeah, and I know that Emily and I did a podcast episode for the CF Trust podcast about what we wish people knew about CF. So if anyone wants to hear more of Emily's story, I'd really suggest heading over to that, as that's kind of got some things about what we wish people knew when we went to uni as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So you moved out when you went to uni, and you were explaining that, and we'll probably touch on CF at uni when you're maybe more unwell, but it's really exciting that you got yourself involved like that. Now, Caitlin, you explained to me kind of your CF story and journey. You're like me in the sense that we commuted to uni, and we'll probably discuss that a bit as well. But yeah, just tell me a little bit about your journey.
Okay, so I started my first year of uni during the COVID pandemic. So we were all having to isolate at home anyway. My A levels were the ones that got cancelled. And when I started, everything was all online. So it was quite a different experience, I think. I felt a lot more nervous actually starting my second year because I just felt like I'd not really been on campus or properly got to know any of my lecturers or my course mates. So I actually found my undergraduate experience to be quite challenging because I wasn't sure how I'd do socially as well. And then I've moved on to do my master's as well, which I've had the opposite experience where I've got to know all of like my lecturers, I've got to know people on my course, getting on well, going into university a lot. So I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic and how we all had to shield was something that hopefully will never be again in our lifetime in terms of this global pandemic that no one had heard of. So it's perfectly natural that kind of you felt that in terms of not quite understanding the campus and I guess feeling that your first year was part of the university experience. If I share a little bit about my story, so I went to the University of Liverpool, and I did communication and media, but I also, like Caitlin, chose to stay at home. It wasn't necessarily a decision to do with my CF. I think if I had CF or didn't, I am quite a home bird. And so I just don't think I was ready to move out. I wasn't independent in terms of doing all my treatments. And so it just kind of made sense to stay where I was. And I think there was too many changes at once. And so that's kind of the decision I made. But similarly to Emily, I got involved in the dance society. I picked up a new sport, which was fencing, albeit to meet friends and a couple of boyfriends, but just to meet people. So university can be exactly what you want it to be. You can get involved in societies, or you don't need to. It can be a time where you create a kind of new version of yourself if you want to. So it's a great opportunity, and it's a really exciting one. There's a few things that I guess we need to think about with CF, but it definitely doesn't stop you doing that. And I think that's really important to say at this point. A couple of the people on the panel today are on CAF Trio. Now, I know that not everyone is able to take CAF Trio for various reasons. There might be some on the call. But when I started university, I wasn't on CAF Trio. So I'll be able to touch on that as well in terms of the nature of it at the time as well. Jenny, do you want to pick up and talk to me a little bit about what was going through your head when your son was moving out, you know, in terms of support and things that maybe if someone's watching this webinar, they might not know exists for them if they have CF?
So the things that, so as a mum, well, I was really worried about how, you know, if he's going to remember to take his meds, and what happens when his meds run out, how would that work? I was worried about the accommodation, because I'd been a student years and years ago, clearly. Student housing can be fairly grim. I was terrified of bathrooms that would have like damp towels and mold in the walls, no ventilation. I was worried about the fridge, because you need to keep meds in the fridge, and is that going to be, you know, with people's dripping raw chicken all over it? So we kind of thought about this beforehand, and where possible, one thing that you should do if you haven't thought already is apply for DSA, which is Disability Students Allowance, because it doesn't so much give you financial support, it'll give you the things you need to make your life easier. So for my son, that was a little fridge to keep in his room, so he could keep all his meds clean and tidy and not in the main fridge. There was never any beer in it when I went up. The other thing that was useful was Tupperware boxes in fridges, so you could put your food, keep it sealed, keep everything clean. And then we've been lucky in being able to have an ensuite room, so have his own shower room and his own toilet, so he can keep it clean. Ventilation, fan, because sometimes these rooms, you know, they'll be very boxy with a tiny little window and no through air because of all the fire doors. So another thing that's quite useful is like a door wedge, keep the door open, let the air go through. So when they all arrive at uni full of coughs and colds, you can at least get some fresh air through the building. So those were practical things that helped. The other thing that we did is learnt to cook. So learnt to cook, do some batch cooking, bolognese, freeze it all in little Tupperware boxes, so that when you've had a long day of lectures or a big night out, you've got something that's nutritious that you can eat easily. And so we did a lot of that. I think I've got a little list here. And then with meds, we kept the prescription renewal with me at home. So I would renew the prescriptions and then either take them up if I went, or Ash would take enough up with him to get on with the term. So I spoke to the GP and said, or the hospital, say, can you write us scripts for 3 months worth of supplies, and took them with.
That's really helpful. And I think, because CF is a hidden disability, we sometimes don't know what support we have. And, there are some things that are obviously means tested, but there are some that flat out, if you're a student who has cystic fibrosis, you are eligible for X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it's important to have the conversations with the universities, but also, and we'll finish with this at the end, the CF Trust have so many pieces of support and advice, and they can really help with what you're entitled to. So when you go to uni, you have maybe your own fridge in your room, so then you can keep things separate. It would have been a fear of mine had I moved out to be sharing a fridge and having my DNAs in the communal fridge, or that would have made me quite nervous.
The CF Trust were brilliant. They sorted they didn't sort the DSA, but they ran through with us the sort of things we should be asking for that would make our lives easy, because we wouldn't have thought about the fridge, or we got a printer and paper so that Ash didn't have to go and stand. It was just after COVID, didn't have to go and stand in a busy library to get things printed out.
Yeah, it's all about making the adjustments, and it's about it's kind of like you said at the start, Jenny, the first step for most people with CF moving out as well, or even if not moving out, gaining a bit more independence in adulting as well. Emily, you were talking about kind of managing CF. So were you ever unwell with CF at university, and kind of can you talk about that in some form of optimistic way in terms of tips of managing your CF if you're slightly unwell at uni?
Yeah, of course. I did actually, we were having this conversation. I wrote an article, and students may have heard of this. It's called The Tab. They're like a student newspaper. I wrote an article that the CF Trust contacted me because of this article, but it might be helpful. It's about living with CF at university. So that probably lists a more detailed view from my perspective, which would be helpful to maybe send out. But I think I got really sick occasionally, particularly in my second year, and Jenny's worst fears came true for me, where I lived in horrible student housing in my second year, because Exeter is famously very expensive. In my first year, I was really lucky. I also got an ensuite that the university supplemented, so I paid the standard rate for a normal room, and got priority of choice, because at Exeter, and I think a lot of universities, you put your choices down for accommodation and then they give them randomly. But if you've got a reason, because obviously some of the places weren't as nice, were a lot older, whereas East Park, where I stayed, was very modern, very clean, never been used. So I got an ensuite and didn't have to pay didn't have to pay the extra.
Amazing.
Also got a fridge. I think, Jenny, your son and I, seems like it's the way you did it is very similar to how we did it. But it's not just, obviously in second year, what I think is interesting, when you're with CF, you want to be able to have as normal life as possible. And for me, that meant I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to live with my friends, and I wanted to have the experience. And it was about mitigating the risk as much as possible without making me lose out on all these experiences. And like I said, I'm very independent and very determined to live as normal a life as possible and surpass it. And for me, it looked like moving out into a second year flat that was significantly worse than my first year, but the prices were so expensive, there was nothing else we could afford. And it did mean, because of how expensive these houses are to heat as well. Like, I was living at some points, it was so cold that I could see my breath in the winter when I was waking up. And I was really lucky at that point. My boyfriend, he's amazing, and he learned how to do all my intravenous antibiotics. He knows my meds probably better than me at this point. And so having that support system, and it's something you can develop. It doesn't necessarily come straight away from your first year, but if you get those friends that you trust, and your partner or whatever, to actually be really vulnerable and to explain to people what CF does to you when you're unwell, because as so many of you know, if you're unwell, you don't know what each day looks like. It's so drastically different from when you're well, and it can really knock you out. And it's every time I get chest infections now, it still shocks me how much worse I feel. So that's important. And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of about, it's not going to be perfect going to uni, and especially living at university. As a CF parent, my parents felt this way as well, really worried. And it's not going to be 100% perfect. But for the vast majority of people, it will be the most amazing, enlightening experience of their lives. And how lucky are we to be able to like do that now. And yeah, so I think for me, being sick it was rough, but at the same time, I had a really good support network. My parents would do the same thing with my medication, and they'd order it, and I did it in the end. In my masters, I was the one doing everything, but having that sort of support that you can lean on, especially when you're unwell, is really important. But at the same time, it might be a bit difficult at first, but you need to adjust to being sick and being the sole person to look after yourself at first. And it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but it's so necessary. But you just need to know when to reach out to people. I think that's important.
And in terms of kind of, if people are listening and, you know, you're 16, 17 and thinking of going to uni, you know, or you're on your way or whatever, or you've just started this like next week or whenever Freshers starts, like it's great. But also I don't want people listening to think they've got to have everything figured out with their health before they go. Like I said, I was not independent at all. I still heavily relied on hands-on physio and pretty much everything being done other than the actual taking of the tablets. But that was because of just life circumstances. And I think, don't compare your CF journey and where you're up to, and if someone's independent or if someone's transitioned at a different time or whatever, to what you're going through, because ultimately there'll be things happening in your life, and you know, it's not by this age you have to do everything yourself. And that's why our hospitals are great at kind of keeping us, supporting us, in the CF Trust as well. And that's why it's great to have things like this so you can ask questions. Caitlin, do you want to talk to me then about commuting? And, you know, because if someone's decided they want to go to uni, and then the next question is like, if it's a uni nearby, or, you know, stay at home or go to, you know, move out. I guess if you feel comfortable, would you share kind of why you chose to commute, and also your uni experience with that? Because I didn't feel I missed out on anything other than grotty halls. But Caitlin, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, so there was quite a few factors when I was like deciding, oh, do I want to move away? Do I want to live at home? I think the first was the course I was doing as well. I wanted to make sure I did a course that I was interested in, and also health reasons as well. So during the sort of pandemic and like my first year of uni, I hadn't yet started CAF Trio, or I was about to start CAF Trio, so I was a lot more unwell, more frequently, like needing IV antibiotics and needing to just have a little bit more support living at home. Because kind of similar to yourself, Lucy, I don't think I had as much of that kind of independence where I felt maybe comfortable to move out and live by myself and manage all of that as well. I found it quite challenging, just I think certain personal circumstances as well. That was part of the reason that I decided to live at home. But I remember there was one point in time where I was considering moving to, I think, Lampeter in Wales to do a philosophy course, and I remember my mum having a miniature heart attack, I think, about that.
Yeah.
And we did go and look around uni accommodation as well. But yeah, I think just the way things worked out naturally for me. I just felt comfortable living at home. I found, again, with everything being online in the first year, from a social point of view, I found it harder, just trying to get to know people on my course. But I really tried my best to throw myself into it in second year. So I joined a few different societies. I joined drama and I joined K-pop dance, and had a lot of fun with that during my second year as well.
Yeah. And it's the societies, because contact time really isn't, depending on like your degree, but my degree, it was about 12 hours a week, and so it was at different times. So it's kind of, you know, when I told my uni, kind of when I declared I had CF and they were asking about support and everything, I kind of said, well, I will be commuting, and it will take a while, and obviously I've got to get up earlier because I've got to do my CF. So if there's any way I don't need to have 9 a.m.s, I'd appreciate that. And credit to them, for the full 3 years, I never started at 9. It was always 10. And everyone loved that on my course. They had no idea that that was because of me. But I thought, you know, if I'm going to use my CF to help everyone and make it so it's not a rush and I can still do my physio really well, then I'm going to ask. But yeah, like you, the societies were kind of how I made my friends and made those connections. And then if I felt I wanted to stay over one night, I had rooms available with friends. So obviously you stayed at the same hospital, didn't you, Caitlin?
I did, yeah.
When your CF centre. Emily, you also stayed at the same CF centre. Jenny, did your son?
Yeah, we did. And it was because he already knew the team.
Yeah.
And we just thought, you know, if something goes wrong and you've got to be hospitalised, you want to be with the team, you know. And also you want to be near home because uni was 4 hours drive away. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us. And it actually worked because we had a freshers flu that he ignored and ignored and ignored until he had to get admitted. And that wasn't smart.
No. But also having the same team, and you know, it is a possibility you can move to a team nearer to university. I don't think any of us on the panel did that, but I think with the way clinics have changed now in terms of virtual ones happening, and depending on how often you would go home, it doesn't seem as maybe imperative to do that. But obviously your son, Jenny and Emily, you would have had to register at a different GP, wouldn't you? So do you both want to explain, number one, how you found a GP, number two, what you had to do if there was communication, you know, all the kind of GP stuff? Jenny, do you want to start?
Okay, so I'll probably pass this over to Emily, because what we did there was at the university, there is a university GP, and when my son went to uni, I just said, you need to register with them because they're the guys that are going to look after you for anything that isn't CF related, and they're the guys that are going to receive the prescriptions from the Brompton and print them out and give you the drugs. So effectively, he then, when he got to uni, like all the other students, he registered with a local GP. And what we also did was, because we weren't sure how that prescription process would run, there's maybe 2 or 3 antibiotics that are the ones that he will use more commonly, is we took a week's supply of each with us. So that if he did get sick and the Brompton said, I want you to take this medicine, he could start taking it immediately, because sometimes he couldn't like miss lectures to go and pick up the meds, or you didn't know which pharmacy to go to, and that was very helpful.
No, that's really helpful, and just having that kind of idea of having some backup antibiotics. Emily, how does it work then when you've chosen your uni, you've got your A levels or whatever, you go into Exeter, packed up, you've sorted your accommodation. Tell me how you found the GP and what you did and how it was.
Yeah, so I did the similar thing where I just automatically registered with the student GP that was on site, and then I think Exeter did it sort of automatically, and then they registered you to a local GP around the city, which was a bit annoying because mine was really far away, so I used to have to get taxis for like COVID vaccines and flu vaccines and stuff. So I then kind of took matters into my own hands and just said, right, I don't want this GP, because it's just so far. So I got a space in my local one, so it was just a couple minute walk. And they were amazing, actually. They were so good, so efficient. In terms of prescriptions, I actually used an online service, which for me was really helpful because Exeter, I'm not sure, whoever's familiar with Exeter, it's very hilly. And I used my electric bike to get around the city, and to get to and from. But it was just one less thing to worry about. I was very, very busy. And it meant that I could order my prescription, it would go through automatically, and then it would be with me through the letterbox within 24, 48 hours, which was amazing. So largely, by and large, it was a really positive experience. For antibiotics, when I did need just orals, then it would be something the Prompton would prescribe and then send to the local GP in my local GP and Exeter, and they distribute it in whatever quickest way they could do it. So sometimes that was pharmacy to you, and sometimes that was to like the Boots on the high street. But again, it didn't take long for the sort of the people I needed to know to be aware, and they were really, really efficient. So yeah, definitely having some kind of medical service down in your university city is important. I would definitely recommend, in my circumstance, staying with the Brompton was a crucial, important, good decision for me and my family. But to have the GP did provide that extra kind of support. So yeah.
Yeah, because you'd be able to go to the GP for kind of general problems and they'd be able to examine you and all that. But yeah, I think it takes a while to build the relationship with the adult CF team that you're with. In a positive way. They want to know about you, your dreams, your life situation, and they look at you as a whole as opposed to just kind of the lungs or the pancreas. And I think it sounds like that was a great option for you to kind of stay at the Brompton with that. If you were unwell with IVs then, Emily, did you have to go to the Brompton to be admitted?
So this was when it got a bit frustrating. So in my second year, I was ill quite a lot. And then I think my housemates were like, no, we don't want to do this anymore. So they sucked it up and paid extra to heat the house more, which was nice. But so we did regular trips. So at a point it was really expensive. My train fares were like eye-watering for a while. And then when my partner, he did a placement in my final year, so he had his car with him, so he would just drive me up to London. So yeah, intermittently. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry, it went.
Yep,
funny.
We can.
Intermittently, it was a pain, but overall, it was a significantly better solution because my CF is very I have quite unusual symptoms and strange little quirks. Like I'm sure a lot of people with CF do. They're very individual and take a long time to learn. I would much rather be at the centre that's cared for me since I was 3 months old than anywhere else. So yeah, I don't know how much of that you heard because my Wi-Fi is like breaking up. So
no, it's all right. We've got you loud and clear. There is a lot going on at this time, and I know I said that before, but it's so true, and it's like learning to cook, and you touched on that, Jenny, in terms of like batch cooking and like how your freezer is your friend. But that's not something that's just if you're moving out. That's something that Caitlin, you and I experienced as well, just kind of budgeting and choosing your meals, and also like you probably like me would take meals with you for lunch if you were at uni all day and things like that. Do you want to talk to me about kind of food, Caitlin, and how you manage that and meal prepping and things like that?
Yeah, so I actually quite enjoy cooking. It's something that my mum taught me like from quite like a younger age, sort of going through secondary school, and I just found that I had like certain comfort meals that I would just like to make, and like things like bolognese, honestly like typical student, like chicken and rice, pasta, carbonara, things like that. But one thing I found really great about York St John's is near where the library was, there was also a student kitchen. So if I was ever, when I was actually going to campus, if I was commuting and taking some of my own food that I'd maybe prepped with me, I could go and then heat that up.
That's a good idea.
And I could go and sit in a space and actually have my meal like properly and, take all my crayon and everything like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found that quite handy.
Having a warm, I'm someone who can't really have like a sandwich for lunch. I always like a warm meal. So the fact that there was somewhere like that, and I guess if anyone on here is thinking of commuting, asking where you could heat things up. Where's the nearest microwave for commuters? At Liverpool University, they had lockers, which was also helpful. So I wasn't lugging everything around all day. But that's definitely if you're commuting, a question of, because you don't want to buy a Subway, a Greggs, all that kind of stuff every day, because you need to support your CF diet as well and make sure you're eating healthily. So that's a really good tip, Caitlin, to kind of ask.
Just on that point as well, going back slightly to the whole like IV antibiotics as well, I found there were times where, so I can do home IVs, and like my parents knew how to do home IVs, so they taught me as well. So because I had that kind of ability, when I had to be on IV antibiotics and go into uni for lectures, I was able to reach out to the uni, and they found like a room that I could basically go in to administer my own IV antibiotics, and I could take a friend in, I could take food in and just sort of sit for however long, like an hour, 2 hours, whatever I needed to just get that sorted.
And so who did you contact for that, you know, in terms of, because university is a big place?
Yes.
Who do you contact for that kind of support? Because that's really great.
Yeah, so at first I went through my academic tutor just to sort of ask, saying, look, I need to start a course for IV antibiotics and I'm probably going to have to do them on campus. Do you know who I can reach out to? And they then referred me to the university's disability support team. And then they were the ones that then organised it. And I think the room that I went to, it was linked to the York St John, like the chaplaincy. So it was just a very quiet, cozy room. It was nice.
That's good to know then for people who are listening, that's a thing as well to ask for. You know, it's all these things that people might not be thinking of that actually is good to think of. So you obviously declared your CF to staff. Did you declare it and kind of declare it? Did you put it into conversation with friends you made as well, or did you kind of keep it? Yeah.
And I've always felt quite comfortable talking about my CF. So yeah, I would tell my friends, because like when I'm hanging out with them on campus and I was taking Creon, they'd be like, oh, what's that? And then it's just doing those little things, then it was like a nice easy sort of route into having that conversation as well. And when I applied to university as well, I put about having CF because they were also able to organise like learner adjustment plans. So I would get usually anywhere between a week to 3 weeks extension on most of my assessments as well. Just if I ever felt unwell and couldn't complete it to the exact deadline, there was a bit more flexibility there. But I found that any support I needed like that, if I wasn't sure, I would always reach out to my lecturers, like my academic tutor especially. They were very supportive.
Yeah, and to have that relationship with them, and I'd forgot about the deadline extensions. I was in hospital in my second year of university for 2.5 weeks, and I had kind of a Pseudomonas and Aspergillus combination that was just
the worst.
Hot water bottle just on my chest because it was so uncomfortable. But I was off for two weeks, and originally there was if you want to do the lectures in hospital, but it was like, actually I just need to be completely rested and no. And so they helped do extra sessions with me one-to-one to catch up on things, or often they said, you know, this lecture isn't going to come up in the assessment, so don't worry. But it was a shared effort to catch me up. It wasn't just on my expectation. And I think from what you were saying, Caitlin, building that relationship with your lecturers is really important to be open about that. Jenny, I see you're nodding.
I think having a good working relationship with just pick one tutor that you get on with, tell them about CF, and then if you've got the DSA in place, then if you do get admitted to hospital, or you just unwell and you just have a few days in bed and you're running late with projects or deadlines, you can get extensions. The universities tend, the way I've seen it, tend to be quite not emotional about it. It's like, okay, if you've been in hospital, we need the evidence. So you get a yellow form from the hospital and you submit that formally. But if you need extensions on deadlines, you speak to the tutor. So if the tutor knows you, they know the issues you're coping with. We've never had a problem with extending deadlines.
No. And I think And as well, I think it maybe changes because you in school and sixth form or college, you used to kind of call in the teachers like Mr. Smith or Mrs. But when you go to uni, it's a real first name basis, and it's a real kind of, you feel very equal to them. It's a kind of a great relationship to have. Emily, tell me a little bit about.
Can I just have one thought that did happen to somebody else I know who doesn't have CF, but at one university, they were in their final year and they'd broken their leg. They couldn't physically get into college to attend tutorials in person. That was a big issue for the university. So if you're thinking about which university, or you've already chosen a university, make sure that you can attend tutorials online, or there is an alternative if you're suddenly have to go to hospital, or suddenly you need to be home and tucked up in a warm, dry bed for a week. Just make sure that that isn't going to jeopardize, the year or the graduation.
It's
put that on my list.
Yeah, no, it's a lot about flexibility, isn't it? It's some days, and it's the understanding that we may be the first CF person they meet, and so they may think it's what it was and how it was described years and years ago, and it's the just the flexibility and the understanding that we need. Some weeks we might be fine. Some weeks walking up a hill might be a bit tiring when it's flu season. There's all these different things to mitigate, but I think especially if your parents have maybe younger children who are in high school or even babies, and you've come on here to see some grown-up CFers, if that's a word. It's a really exciting time as well that this is a possibility and definitely a thing that happens. Emily, tell me about how you declared your CF, if you told your friends, how you did that.
Yeah, so I kind of wasn't too bothered about telling people, as in I did exactly what Caitlin did, and usually it would just be something that would come up with when I was eating, with my crayon. I think with friends, we just would like chat about it, and it would be I'd sort of make it a bit of a joke sometimes in like a nice way, and kind of just let people know that it was okay and that I was okay. But I think it's important to declare it. You don't have to tell everyone. The important people that should be knowing are your academic tutor, the accessibility team, as in like the disability team you work with. All of those core people, your flatmates in first year is a really good one because they're going to be with you all the time. And that's kind of important, I think. And also, especially if you're going on things like nights out, it's important for them to be aware, because if you start feeling a bit rough, or if you react to some alcohol, or I don't know, something happens, it's important that they're aware, and it's not just you've got these extra things that you need to think about. So I think I wasn't too fussed about saying about it, and it was the right thing to do, to be open and honest. And people are really supportive, and are just there to listen and to learn. So I can't think of a single bad experience I had upon declaring my condition. I was given lots of flexibility as well, if I needed it. For me it was quite relaxed.
So obviously when we're at university, many people have jobs as well, because we need to make ends meet. And there's only so far that I think the student finance goes to, and when it gets dropped and everything. Did any of you have jobs? And Jenny, did your son have a job whilst he was studying as well?
Not at uni, but in the holidays, yes. But
Emily?
I think it depends on I think Emily or Caitlin mentioned before, like some courses will have a lot more contact hours than others. So if you're in a STEM subject, by the time you've coped with feeding yourself, getting around and doing your studies in your labs, it's going to be hard to find time to work. But if you're doing something like law or history and you've got less contact hours, it's more flexible. You can maybe have a job. I heard of somebody who was working in a cafe, so they actually got fed for free, which is quite nice, but just do like a couple of shifts and earn some money. But it's not always easy.
No. Caitlin, did you have a job? Or I guess the expenses maybe weren't as much because you commuted, that might be also a factor.
So I found, so my undergrad and masters have been totally different experience. So with living at home during my undergraduate, I was able to kind of be a bit more, so I got a disability living allowance or PIP, but I was also a bit more reliant financially upon like my parents as well. Um, and I also found that my course had a lot of contact hours, so and with the state I was in with my health at the time, I wouldn't have been able to balance that. But
Yeah.
since I started my masters, so I now live like on my own with my boyfriend. I've got a part-time job which I started after finishing my undergraduate. I took a gap year where I got a little part-time job. I work at just little cafe tea rooms, just waitressing. I do 3 days a week at the minute. Um, and then I I've always been quite open with them about my CF as well, and I told them that I had plans on going back to university. There's quite a lot of my colleagues that don't have CF, but a lot of them are traveling to and from university as well. And I just found that being open with them,
Yeah.
they've always been very supportive of me. Um, and what I've been wanting to do with like my masters and sort of making sure that the adjustments that I need are in place in
Yeah.
terms of like what days I can work
Yeah.
and yeah, just literally anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been very supportive.
That's so useful to know. And Emily, you put your hand up. You had a job.
Yeah, I had jobs. So I I did, I think in my first year I didn't have a job. I was able to just live it up, and I really did. I did quite literally everything and anything. And then the second year I started working. So I did a few kind of unpaid volunteering roles in fashion journalism at first, which was probably a bad idea because it was a lot of hours and no pay, which is a whole problem in itself. So that wasn't good. But then I actually got an opportunity um, from Exeter University. Their career service offers something called access to internships, which you could essentially create your own internship and they would provide the funding, but you had to have some kind of disability in order to to apply for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to go into publishing. I did English literature degree at Exeter before I went into my publishing masters, and I approached the local publishing house that I'd really looked up to, and I was gaining mentorship from them anyway, and then started working there part time, and then that ended up becoming a full-time job in all of the holidays. So as soon as it was like term was over, I was working full time. And that was very, very flexible in terms of where I was. Obviously, it was full-time hours, but I could be remote. I could be working in the office if I wanted to. I could be living in Exeter, but not going into the office. And I continued that in my final year. I also worked in sustainability for the sustainability engagement team at the University of Exeter. So that was also incredibly flexible, incredibly supportive. I think a lot of you, if you are a student looking, or whoever's on here, if money and looking at a job is kind of the only solution that you can have to being able to justify going to uni, actually applying to jobs at the university itself is a better shout because they're so flexible. There's a lot of them. The pay is really strong, and because of things like your IELTS, your learning plan, because of DSA, all of these things are all interconnected, and the essentially the way that your job will work hand in hand with your CF. So that will mean maybe a lot more flexibility. And it was, for myself, I needed to work to justify being at university, especially in my masters. And it meant I was able to save up a bit of money, and I was able to pay for myself to do things and have a life. And that was really important to me. And it ended up, because of that publishing role, is one of the reasons I got my job that I do today that I love. So yeah, I'd say it's not easy at times. It was really hard, especially if I was ill. It was a lot of work. But I like to challenge at the time. But it's not for everyone. But if you can do it, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think everything's to do with balance and kind of like physical and mental balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving out, the big change, it can be a new mental challenge to remember to do your tablets and wash everything and all that kind of stuff. But it's an opportunity for you to learn more about your body and for you to know when you're feeling off or if you've got a different cough or anything like that. My final kind of question before we sum up is about, especially because for some reason uni decides to start in September, which is when coughs, colds, flu, everything is kind of bubbling back up again, which don't we all just love? So the balance of going on nights out and doing things but keeping yourself well, being able to say no if you're actually tired and knowing your limit of being tired, I, looking back, have no idea how I wasn't burnt out and tired in the first month or so, just because I was trying to meet people and make friends, etc. But there's something to be said about still having the student life, still going to university, but balancing it and actually coping with the winter bugs and things like that. So I made a few notes of things I did, and then I guess I'll go around the room. I made sure I had the MEN-ACWY vaccine, which was the meningitis one, which is like the freshers vaccine, which is a really good top tip to have. It's not a live vaccine, so it's fine if you're on immunosuppressants like I am for a different condition. That I felt was a good thing to do. I only feel since after the pandemic have worn a face mask, if I'm in a crowded environment on a public transport, because it feels more socially acceptable now, doesn't it? But in terms of when I was at uni, I would go on nights out. Granted, if someone was coughing right next to me, I'd move. But I would use the saline solutions to like squirt up my nose just to kind of infection to go. And then I also use something called First Defense. As I said, this is only my opinion. It's not the CF Trust's or anyone else's, but the First Defense was a good thing to stop coughs and colds kind of starting in your nose. Caitlin, we'll go around the room. Caitlin, tell me kind of your tips, I guess, for surviving uni in the winter months.
I think again, like you said, making sure I've got vaccines. I always have like a stock of broad spectrum antibiotics, just if I ever feel like, something's bubbling in my chest, and just to kind of cover bases until, hopefully it wouldn't get any worse. But if I needed to then approach my CF team about it, at least I've started myself on something to cover that base. I always found like when I had just colds and flus, like Lemsip and Vicks on your feet at night with socks going to bed. Yes. That's always been like my go-to. And I think in terms of nights out as well, I think trying to know like your limits as well with drinking, and to know that it is perfectly okay if you're not maybe matching the same pace as like your other friends. Like, your body is your own. If you know your limits, I would always try and make sure that between maybe each drink or every other drink, I was having a little bit of water. And then when I got home, 2 paracetamol and water before bed. I found that was
I did that too.
That seemed to help me out a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're all normal at the end of the day as well. We want to go on nights out, and I actually did a bit of a nightclub tester where I went to most of them, and the ones that were like disgusting, or the ones I'd heard of being disgusting, I was like, well, I'm not going to go there. I'll go to maybe the cleaner one. But yeah, exactly the same. Not feeling the pressure. I think that's the thing. Not to feel the pressure to be anyone else but yourself. And if someone's down in however many beers or what have you, like, good for them. But actually, like, do you even want to do that? On
that point as well, I've never been like a massive drinker, so every now and again it's it can be fun to go out with friends, but like my friendship group, I'm very lucky, very supportive, and I think when you're around the right kind of people, you don't feel that pressure to have to drink anyway. And I also found that my university put on non-drinking socials as well. So definitely look into that as well if it's not of interest to go out.
Yeah, I'd go out just for the dancing. That was my absolute highlight. Jenny, tell us about your son and kind of how, or what as a parent you maybe wished he'd done, or hoped
Okay.
would be what happened?
He did the opposite to you guys. He went full on Freshers Week, got sick, refused to admit he was sick, and as I said, ended up in hospital. But things that I would think about for living through the winter at uni, is staying warm and dry, like Caitlin said. But the hardest thing in my mind is laundry, because the washing machines at uni don't spin very well. The tumble dryers don't dry very well. So if you've got big, thick hoodies and you're trying to wash those all the time, you're going to have all this wet laundry in your room and it's going to get damp and smelly. So thin layers that wash easily. And if you do need to dry stuff in your room, hang it in the bathroom, close the door and run the extractor fan. And then keep the damp out of the bedroom.
That is just a good life hack. I'm gonna be doing that here to save money.
So I mean, I'm paranoid about Pseudomonas and that damp in bathroom, and also teaching your child to just get a bleach spray and wipe the walls down.
Yeah.
So, that was good. So yeah.
Emily.
Yeah, I sound probably more like your son, Jenny, where I kind of was a bit of a party girl in my first year. I don't regret that at all. I had the most amazing time. Obviously made mistakes, but CF or no CF, I think that's kind of a very normal part of university. It took me a few bad attempts to then realise what my limits were. And again, I think that was something that made me feel like everyone else as well. That wasn't something that necessarily CF made me any different. Like, yeah, having a rubbish hangover sucks. It sucks for everyone. So yeah, I did the paracetamol thing, which I don't think is actually very good for you, but I did do it.
Again, let's just put that out there. That's not something the CF Trust is saying to do. That is
What is the paracetamol thing?
Just having paracetamol after a night out with some water and then going to bed. But that always seemed to help me. But also, again, make a big thing for me as well was making sure I was eating plenty before a night out and
take a snack with you. Take a bag of crisps.
What I'd always do as well.
Never care about a bag of crisps.
No, and when you're on a night out, I was one of those people, I love to dance, and I was like, I'm not going to bring a bag, that's not cool. So I would take my crayon and I would have like a tiny little holder for my crayon and I keep that. Obviously you need to be careful because sometimes they'll check you and they might sort of see your crayon and be like, what's that? And you can obviously, just so long as you've got some kind of evidence to prove what it is. But because if you're going on a night out and then your friends say, oh, let's go get chips, and you want to have the chips but you don't have your crayon with you, that's really frustrating, and that does differentiate you. So having that kind of thinking ahead is important.
Always.
And this makes it sound like I was a massive party girl that kind of very quickly weaned off. And I enjoyed myself with so many lovely socials and things that were completely alcohol free. And again, it was learning your best friendship groups and who looked after you on a night out, and you could look after them as well. It was a collaborative thing, and just making sure you feel safe. But again, I don't think that is necessarily anything CF specific. I think that's just being a good friend at university. So yeah, I think if you're a student or if you're a parent, whoever it is, the person going to university is not going to do it perfectly, but sometimes the mistakes need to happen to learn. And I think that's kind of a privilege of the situation we're in, that the opportunity to go to university provides that space to do so.
Yeah, and I think keeping in touch, keeping the line open with home as well, chatting to them regularly, how you're doing, how you're feeling, what you're up to. They just want to know what you're up to as well. And, I think that's really important because it's hard for whoever you've lived with when you move out, if you do move out, because all they've done is do their best to keep you well. So it's a big change for them as well. With that being said, obviously we've said it's about balance. It's a huge change, but there are only small adjustments that take place so that we can shine, and that's what it's about, and that's what this is about. And with that being said, if you want support or kind of to know more of the ways where these adjustments can take place, I'm just going to ask Jimmy to pop on. Jimmy, if you've not met him, is the Work Forwards manager at the CF Trust. He also has CF himself, and he's just going to explain a little bit about if you're going to uni, at uni, a parent of someone who's thinking about it, what the CF Trust can do. So over to you, Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fantastic hearing your stories as well. I actually went to university as well a long time ago, and it's took me on a really nice nostalgia trip hearing all of your stories, and in comparing and contrasting that against my own university experience. But yeah, as Lucy said, the CF Trust is really keen to kind of provide those that are going away to university or studying at home in their hometowns at universities, provide them with really kind of in-depth support package so that they can get the best out of their university experience and have the opportunity to get the best possible grades whilst they're at university. So we have Rachel, who is our welfare officer, and she can't unfortunately be on the call tonight. So I'm just going to do a very quick introduction to her kind of service and what she does. But yeah, she offers a one-to-one support service, and we kind of look at all of the support that you're able to tap into. Some of the stuff that you've already touched on in the discussion today around Disabled Students Allowance, but we also work together to consider, the options that you have to be able to increase your income. And that can include access to welfare benefits, discretionary payments, but also looking at tips and guidance around budgeting to make your money go further, and also accessing all of the available discounts out there for students and for people with cystic fibrosis. As I said, we can also look at discussing your rights and help you in an application for Disabled Students Allowance, and essentially take some of that pressure off you to find out all of this information for yourselves so that you or your child can get the absolute maximum out of that university experience. And as Emily said, it is such a enlightening journey over that period of time. And yeah, we want to be able to kind of ensure that those with CF that are going to university gets to access the full potential of that. We also have our Joseph Levy Educational Fund for anyone who is studying, whether that be in further or higher education or also vocational training. And that's available for anyone in the UK who has cystic fibrosis and can go towards things like travel to and from university. If you are deciding to stay at home and commuting to campus, it can go towards subsidising that ensuite accommodation, giving you a little bit of extra money towards putting those items in your shopping basket to maintain the diet that is so important for us with cystic fibrosis, all those all important educational and course materials to give you the maximum opportunity to come out and graduate from university with the best possible qualification. We also have a number of resources that we will supply to you via email in our wrap-up process for this session. We have our own webpage, and also links to external organisations such as the Money Advice Hub for student with resources for students, and the Student Money Manual 2024-25, and I'm sure there will be an up-to-date version coming out soon for the new academic year. So that kind of wraps up that part of the support. I am conscious that we are already over, but I did want to just flag that there is a question as well in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see that, Lucy.
Yeah, I was going to say and thanks for that, Jimmy, that was amazing. If anyone has any questions, we'll probably spend the next 5 minutes answering those. So just please put any questions you have in the Q&A box, which would be helpful. One of them, which I'll read out, is kind of about, did anyone start full-time then go part-time due to CF complications, both mental and physical? I think none of you mentioned that, so I'm guessing that you all were full-time. I also imagine if you are in a a position where making that decision, when you go into the open day, it'd be a good idea to ask how many contact hours there are, because my degree basically was less than part-time because of the amount of contact time. But if you were training to be a dentist, a vet, or a doctor, that's a very, very different program. So I think it's just having as much, having as many questions answered as possible when you're at the open day, as well. Has anyone, if there's any other questions, I'll just wait to see if anyone else is putting questions in. Do you three want to sum up, if you were to, looking back, the advice you would give your younger self about uni and CF, maybe like 2 points each? Emily, you're nodding, so I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I think the first one would just be absolutely throw yourself in, whatever that might look like for you, because again, we've all got very different situations. But I think just throw yourself in. The things you've always wanted to try. I did a lot of research on societies before I went, and the one society I wanted to join, I did join, and 4 years later I was the president, and we won lots of different campaign national competition things, and it was like a massive highlight of my uni experience. And that started from me being quite a timid first year, going to the meeting and just showing up. So I think throw yourself in whatever you're passionate about is really important. And then also don't worry about being perfect. And I mean that from a student perspective, and I also mean it from a CF perspective. There's so much pressure, and I know like my parents were amazing at supporting me as much as possible. And there were times where I would forget a pill or something would happen and I'd get sick. And it's not something that I would do now necessarily, but I needed that learning process in order to do that. So I think so long as you've got that really good network with your family back home, with your hospital, and you're open and you're communicating, there's room to be imperfect. And I think it is that opportunity. And you want to be your healthiest, happiest self, but sometimes that comes with sometimes spending more time worrying about your degree or going on a night out or making friends. That those things do happen. And that, again, like I've been saying, is just part of being a student as opposed to being someone with CF, and the CF is the additional thing we have to think about. And it's okay if it doesn't occupy your space for 100% of the time, all the time. So
definitely. Caitlin?
Yeah, mine probably aligns with yours quite a bit, Emily. Just throw yourself into it, have fun. Try not to put too much pressure on yourself, because we all make mistakes, we're all human. But definitely my biggest one is just knowing when to reach out for support, making sure you're making use, or as much use as possible, out of the support that's available. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really, really helpful. And Jenny, finally, from your point of view.
Okay, from a parent's point of view, step back early, try and hand over care before, with plenty of time. And when they go, just like Emily and Caitlin, just keep in touch, keep the support there. Even if it's just a text, and if you hear them sounding croaky on the phone, then just encourage them to seek help. And don't be too scared as a parent, because it's an amazing opportunity to go, and you can always come home. So yeah, it's good.
That's they're all really great tips, and it is such a different time to even 5 years ago with CF. So if you're kind of, I don't know who's kind of listening to this, but if you are, CF looks a lot different now. So it's an optimistic thing, and it's an exciting thing to talk about.
The other thing was, I'm just making some notes as we go, but definitely when my son went, when they were looking at accommodation, we did say that he shouldn't be in accommodation with, in a shared flat with anybody else with CF.
Well,
so we did flag that.
This brings me on to a question that someone's put in the chat about any tips on managing cross-infection. Now, clearly, this is the most unique part about CF, albeit maybe the most nerve-wracking in times. This isn't just something for university. This is something we've dealt with at schools, when we're on the train, when we're in the cinema. This is a day-to-day thing. In terms of managing CF for me as a commuter, what I did was I let my university know about cross-infection, and I asked them to send an email out to everyone on my course saying, because for GDPR reasons, they can't ask, if people don't declare it, they can't say, do you have CF, because it's like privacy. So I asked for an email to be sent out that said, someone on this course has cystic fibrosis. If this would be a matter of, you know, for cross-infection purposes, if this is something that would affect you, please do get in touch so that we can keep everyone safe. And that way, they didn't say my name, they didn't say who it was, but they put it out there that then if that person doesn't, that's on them then, isn't it? We've been as open as we can. Has anyone else got anything to add on that? I think that's pretty much the only way to just declare it, be open.
I did very similar, pretty much the exact same.
So did I.
Yeah.
It's what we've got to do, isn't it? And it's what we did at school to make sure that we weren't in classes with other people with CF, and at work it will be what we do for the rest of our lives on it. So yeah, I don't think there are any other questions, so I'll just double check. Nope. Nope, I think that's it. So I'm just gonna say a huge thank you for everyone joining in. This recording will be sent to you all tomorrow, and there'll be a feedback email in the next coming days. So thank you very much. A huge thank you to all the panelists as well. It's been such an honor to chat to you and hear your stories, and I hope people found it interesting and exciting. Thank you.